Mr. Speaker, after the election, the Premier met with Prime Minister Harper, and it was reported with respect to the Canadian Wheat Board that the Premier thinks that there is still room for negotiation, but the biggest question is how well the two opposing governments on this debate will play together in the sandbox and deal with what happens in Manitoba when the monopoly is gone. The economic impact of the Canadian Wheat Board is large on the future for farmers in Manitoba, on the Port of Churchill, and on Winnipeg, with an estimated 2,294 jobs in Winnipeg dependent on the Canadian Wheat Board, of which some 460 are positions in the Canadian Wheat Board itself. I ask the Premier, with the Canadian Wheat Board sitting in the crosshairs of being eliminated by the federal Conservative government, what is the provincial government going to do?
Yeah, I thank the member for the question. It's a great question. One thing we won't do is we won't turn it into a museum like the members opposite are proposing. That's what their objective is. They want to add the leader of the opposition, and they want to add another signature museum to the province of Manitoba, and then they want the province to fund it as a signature museum.
Order. Sorry to interrupt. I'm asking for the cooperation of all members of the House, please. Allow us to proceed with the question and answer period. The Honourable First Minister has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member knows, we've made a very strong case for the value of the Wheat Board in Manitoba, as well as throughout the prairies. The member has correctly stated there's a number of direct jobs here and indirect jobs. And what will be the impact of taking away the single desk from those folks that are working here? It's a head office in Manitoba. What will be the impact of no longer directing grain through Churchill, where it's over 90% of the traffic that goes through that port? And what will be the impact of ending the single desk on small and medium-sized farmers, particularly those that are a long distance from market? These are all very important issues that need to be addressed by the federal government as they move forward on this legislation, and we have not seen sufficient information on how they will cope with that in their decision to end the single desk. So the member asks a good question. The question needs to be answered not only by the federal government, but by the members opposite that support that initiative.
Mr. Speaker, it was reported in the Globe and Mail in early October that the Premier is almost resigned to losing the battle on the Canadian Wheat Board, and that the Premier admitted that there's little he can do to stop Stephen Harper and the single desk. The Premier also said that as Premier, he has a responsibility to make sure that Manitoba comes out of this better off than it was before. I asked the Premier, has he given up? And what is the Premier's transition plan if the single desk goes, given that Stephen Harper has the single desk in his crosshairs and his finger is pressing increasingly hard on the trigger?
I appreciate the metaphor and the analogy from the member opposite. The reality is this. The federal government is changing the legislation. They're removing all the duly elected farmers from the Wheat Board after farmers in majority across the prairies said they wanted to maintain the single desk. If they believe that they can ignore the wishes of farmers and end the single desk in the Wheat Board, it is their responsibility to determine what happens, what the impacts are on small and medium-sized farmers, particularly those that are far from market. It is their responsibility to identify what will be done with the employees that may lose their jobs as a result of this decision. And it is their responsibility to put in place a program to maintain the strategic importance of the Port of Churchill for the security of this country and as the only inland deep-sea port in the country. Those responsibilities are federal responsibilities, and it's our job to ask them and demand from them a suitable plan to address those questions. I hope the member from River Heights will join with us in asking for that accountability.
Mr. Speaker, the federal Conservative government has indicated that they will provide some dollars for the Port of Churchill.
Yes. Point well taken, very far.
And that for a few years they will subsidize the shipping of wheat through the Port of Churchill. But they the federal government has not presented a viable plan for the future of the Port of Churchill. I asked the Premier,
Read the whole letter.
why has the provincial government not yet presented a viable long-term plan for the future of the Port of Churchill?
Don't have one.
And it needs to be obviously as part of a larger plan for the future of the grain industry and for farmers in Manitoba.
It's Swaggerville.
I asked the Premier,
Their plan is
when will we see such a plan so that it can be debated in the Manitoba legislature?
Force. He first of all gathered support from the right wing of the House. Then he moved over and tried to get support from us. The reality is this, Mr. Speaker. If the member from River Heights, the leader of the Liberal Party, is truly concerned about the wheat board, we'll see him at the rally this afternoon. We'll see him down there supporting the farmers of Western Canada, the farmers who have in majority said they want to maintain the single desk. He'll be down there supporting Churchill, Manitoba. He'll be down there supporting employees in Winnipeg, and he'll be down there particularly supporting small and medium-sized farmers throughout Western Canada who have expressed their concerns many occasions. They are being removed. Their voice is being snuffed out in this bill that's being brought forward in Ottawa. It needs to be listened to. I hope he will join us in allowing and pushing the federal government to listen to producers all throughout Western Canada.